Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here with us today. I am really excited to bring this to you today, but I'm going to give about 20 seconds for some last-minute stragglers to get in here, and then we'll be respectful of your time and get the show on the road. All right. Well, again, thank you guys for joining us today. I am really excited to be here. Today we have really the great opportunity and real pleasure to be speaking with Mel Barnes, who is the Chief Operating Officer at Oklahoma State Bank and really the champion behind their MRB program at that institution. So we'll start with just a little bit of housekeeping here. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available for review after the fact. We'll send it out in a post-webinar follow-up. And really, we're saving the last portion of this webinar for a live Q&A session with Mel. So feel free to submit questions throughout this beginning part, and we'll get them answered for you. And lastly, we have Courtney here, who's also a fellow RiskScout employee. And any questions you have, she'll be giving them to us. So don't be alarmed if you hear another lady in the room today. So with all that said, let's get started here. My name is Kristen Parker. I'm the Director of Compliance at RiskScout. To give you a little bit of my background, I've been in banking my whole professional career and mostly compliance in the BSA officer chair. My last job was at a $4 billion institution where we banked about every high-risk business you can imagine under the sun, and I actually created one of the first Federal Reserve Bank approved hemp programs in the United States. So I'm wildly familiar with what it takes to build programs and run them, and it's definitely led to us making really great changes and platform through RiskScout to kind of tackle the challenges that comes with banking high risk businesses. And I'll introduce Mel here. She again is the Chief Operating Officer at Oklahoma State Bank, and I'll let her give you a little bit of her background.
Hi guys, and thank you for having me, Kristen. My name is Mel Barnes, and I have spent most of my banking career of about 25 or 26 years on the operations end of things, primarily in payments and e-commerce and just operations in general, but really focused on the technology side of it. And so Oklahoma State Bank started looking at a cannabis program in 2018 when medical marijuana passed in Oklahoma. And so we spent about 12 months kind of trying to figure out what we were going to do with that. And we started banking cannabis customers, the first one in January of 2020. And since then, we've been able to add about 350 customers. So that's what I've spent the last year and a half doing, is focusing on our cannabis program.
Great, thank you, Mel. Appreciate it. I thought before we get into this Q&A, which I know most of you are here for, we thought we would take a minute just to go over, what the regulators are saying and what the FinCEN expectations are around building a program. So that being said, let's start with the 2014 guidance we got from FinCEN. We need to start with really the basics of what the regulator expectations are. These are a few of the basic core expectations FinCEN provided us in 2014, which are still equally, if not more important than ever. Those include verifying approved licenses in the states in which you are operating. Sometimes that involves reviewing their application if they don't have the physical license yet. You're also charged with ensuring that license is still active. Requesting state licensing and enforcement authorities to get them to give you information on related parties if that state is willing to do so. Just, as aiding in your due diligence efforts, because we all know that within this space, due diligence is really key. And then, onboarding is one step in the pathway, and then that's just part of your heavy lifting. And then really the heavy lifting comes after they're onboarded. So when you're onboarding them, you're going to really want to get a strong understanding of what their normal business activity is, including what products they're being sold, how many acres they're growing, just really depending on the nature of the business. What you also are required in charge of doing is understanding the Cole Memo priorities to ensure that your THC customers, your marijuana banking customers, are not violating those said priorities. Now, in the next slide, we'll go over into that a little bit deeper. Again, suspicious activity reporting seems to be one of the biggest burdens and the biggest heartburns involved in banking this space. Once you onboard a THC Cannabis customer, you have to file your suspicious activity reports 30 days after the customer is onboarded and every 90 days hereafter for the life of the relationship. And it doesn't just end when the relationship ends. You still have to let the FinCEN know that the relationship has been terminated by filing a termination SAR. And really, financial institutions should be studying and refreshing themselves regularly on the FinCEN red flags regarding marijuana banking to determine when priority SARs must be filed. So priority SARs are when you actually decide that something is suspicious. You have to put priority SAR in your SAR narrative to let them know that this one actually is breaking local state laws, whether or you are assuming that they are. Now, the Cole Memo priorities the Cole Memo basically stated in layman's terms, leave these, if it's legal in their state, if marijuana is legal in their particular state, you don't really need to be going out and prosecuting these people unless they are breaking any of these 8 exceptions here. So you want to make sure your customers are not selling to minors. They don't want any, you need to make sure that they're preventing revenue from the sale of marijuana. That's going to criminal enterprises, gangs, cartels. This one is particularly important. Number 3 is a diversion of marijuana from states where it's legal under that state law, and then it's taken to another state where it's considered illegal. Preventing state authorized marijuana activity from being used as a cover or pretext for trafficking of other illegal drugs or other illegal activity. Preventing violence in the use of firearms and the cultivation or distribution of marijuana. Preventing drug driving and exacerbation of adverse public health consequences associated with marijuana use. Preventing the growing of marijuana on public lands for public safety reasons, and preventing marijuana possession or use on federal property. So if any of those are detected by one of your customers, that's when a priority SAR would be warranted. It's really important to take into consideration the FinCEN guidance and what their expectations are, considering the fact that it's becoming more and more pressing the more and more legal the states legalize it. So really important thing that happened earlier this year was the first penalty related to cannabis banking, the first consent order, and it was by the NCUA. And basically this institution, what it boils down to is having an MRB program, but not having it properly ran. So essentially, this institution was not filing SARs or CTRs in accordance with FinCEN rules. They had software, but they weren't utilizing it correctly. And, that can be blamed on both the software provider and the institution for, number one, software provider failing to maybe properly educate them on how to use it and ensuring and checking in with them to make sure their program is continuing to stay on track where it should be. And then the institution thinking that they have the software that is, that's checking a box for them. It takes much more effort in that sense to really understand that, while staffing is important, proper softwares to assist you in this banking process is equally important, but it's also understanding that you can't just put one person in charge of a program that's being scaled up to hundreds and hundreds of customers. It takes a real understanding from your executive management that, in order to scale a program, you really need to invest in a software that's going to take you across that finish line and then grow with you as your program grows, right? Not just leave you, no pun intended, high and dry here. So some high-level best practices for building a THC cannabis program would really, you need to start with a risk assessment. Completing a risk assessment will allow you to evaluate your current ability to successfully launch a cannabis program. It's an honest view of what's going on at your financial institution. We all know that sometimes it's a painful process, but nothing gets you better results to show your potential gaps you need to fill before launching a program than a risk assessment. Secondly, the board of directors need to be informed of the risk assessment findings once you're completed, so they may weigh in with their thoughts and potential blessing with moving forward to complete a program build. It's much better to go into it with a risk assessment that's completed and get their buy-in kind of early on what your concepts are than it is to bring the risk assessment and then find out, go build a whole program to only find out that they don't want to even hear it. It could be a big waste of time for you, so it's better just to bring it in and inform them, get their blessings early on. Regulators should be involved during the program build to give their thoughts and best practices. You don't ever want to take your regulator off, on a tangent that you did not involve them during it. If they're really there, your regulators, most of them anyway, are there to kind of take you along and help you learn from other institutions that have gone a long way and build their programs. They're usually there to be support for you. They're not typically won't tell you yes or no, you can do something unless you're under a consent order. But I've had great success building a cannabis program alongside my regulators, and it just made it much, much easier during the exam time. Equipping with proper software is really, really important. If you plan to scale your program, you need proper software in place to help with onboarding and ongoing monitoring efforts of running a program. Doing it manually is not sustainable. What happens is, you may not think you're going to go out and market it. You don't think think you're having a really quiet program, but these industries are much, much more talkative, and it catches wind and it sets the whole place on fire, because before you know it, you had 5-10 customers. Next thing you know, you've got 150. So it's really important that you invest in proper software in the beginning that can help you grow and scale your program. It's also a best practice if you are deciding to get into this industry, is it's almost too much of a risk to take if you are only planning to have 5 or 10 customers. If you're going to do this, it's better to scale it and assess your program as it grows. Maybe you go in there saying we're not going to have any more than 30 to 50 customers. That's fine, but you need to have a plan in place really to understand what you are going to need to actually run this program and run it successfully. And so then we go back to the board of directors. So when we go back to the board of directors, they need to sign off on your final program build prior to launch. Your regulator will ask for proof of this. You don't want to go in there and launch a program that you kind of quasi got a blessing from a regulator from early on, or from your board of directors early on, only to find out after the fact that once you built it out, they decided that the risk and the cost was going to be too much for your institution. So it's better to get their blessing. It's almost required to get their blessing prior to launching this, because they are the ones that are ultimately responsible for your financial institution's final decisions. And the best practice is to really let your regulator know your final program build has launched, and check in with them on occasion as your program grows. What you definitely don't want to do is get in there and really have a program that you thought was going to be 5 or 10 clients. They come and get in there to examine you, and you now have 150, and they didn't bring enough staffing to examine you and examine that part of your BSA program along with everything else. And it just sets the wrong tone going in. It can make them really, in a foul mood. It can cause them to go down rabbit holes, and you just don't want to really cross that line with them. So those are really just the high level concepts of what it takes to build it. But I really am excited because Mel is here to tell us really from her perspective what it took to get in there and actually build one in real life. So with that, I think we should go ahead and start our Q&A here, so we have plenty of time to cover what everybody else might be asking. So go ahead and submit your questions as you deem necessary, but I think Courtney probably has some few that we can start with.
Yes, we do. Here's one. Did regulars ever tell you you cannot bank cannabis? It's federally illegal.
So, no, none of our regulators said, no, you cannot do that. We had an interesting experience with our regulators, however, because, and we are a state chartered bank. So we are, our two regulators are the State Banking Department of Oklahoma and the FDIC. And so when we presented our program to our state banking department, we got sort of an interesting response. And that response was, okay, well, whatever. We were prepared to answer questions and go through our program with them, and they just did not act very excited or have their feathers ruffled or anything like that. They just kind of said, okay, thank you for letting us know.
Huh. And that was just your state ones, or was that the FDIC as well? Did they have that same reaction?
The FDIC had a little bit different reaction, but they also did not get really involved in conversation about it. They wanted to thank us for letting them know, and they didn't ask us much about the scope of our program or how many clients we envisioned or anything like that. But they acted very appreciative that we let them know that we were going down that road.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Another question. This is a good one. How do you handle all of that cash? This is a very cash-intensive business, so how do you manage the cash, and do you charge any fees for that?
Okay, so cash and compliance, those are the two biggest things that we have found over the last 18 months that cause pain points for us. So cash. We like to use a cash courier and not even have that cash come into the bank, but we do have customers who really feel like they are just getting eaten up in fees, and they don't understand why it is so expensive to bank cannabis. And so those customers like to bring their own cash in. Well, so how do you handle that cash? You need to be prepared to have a 3 to 5 day a week pickup from your cash hauler, whether that's Loomis or Brinks, or if you use someone local. You need to really take a look at your vault limits. You need to take a look at your teller drawer limits, because I don't think you have any idea how much cash you're going to get ready to see. So in addition to upping the frequency of our cash sales to the Fed, we also had to hire security to be in all of the locations where we take the MRB deposits, because we did really feel like that was a security risk. We did have security at our locations 2 to 3 days a week, and that would rotate, so the bad guys didn't know, okay, well, they have security Tuesdays and Thursdays. But with the influx of cash, we felt like it was necessary to really beef up our security. And so all of our lobbies where we accept cannabis deposits do have full-time security now. So a good way to keep that out of the bank is to partner with a good cash courier. We have chosen a local partner. By local, I mean it's not Loomis or Brinks. Loomis and Brinks don't even like cannabis money. And so that is something else you need to be prepared for. You might get there's a lot of stigma still surrounding this industry, and you need to be prepared to deal with that, even from third-party vendors you've been using for some time. Loomis and Brinks, as I said, are not big fans of the cannabis dollar. So we have a cash courier that we partnered with, and he will go out to the locations, whether that be a grow facility or a dispensary, a lab, or any of the verticals. They will go out directly, pick up that cash, and take it to the Federal Reserve on our behalf. So that's a win-win for everyone. It keeps that cannabis operator from the risk of traveling to the bank with a backpack full of cash. It keeps it out of our branches. And so it really is just more secure if your larger customers are willing to partner with a cash courier and let them pick up that cash.
And then, Mel, isn't it that once it gets, it's still FDIC insured, right?
It is. It is. It certainly is.
Yeah, and I think that's what people fail to remember. That part is better than under your mattress, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's safer there. When customers are not dealing in cash, when they have access to ACH transactions and all of these different electronic vehicles we have, it's safer for your communities. It's safer for that cannabis business owner. It's safer for the bank.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Okay, we have another question. Do you need to have a branch in the state in which the cannabis banking client is licensed in order to bank that client?
Okay, I'm going to say that is probably going to vary from state to state according to that state's banking laws. For us, it is not necessary for us to have a branch, according to the state banking laws in Oklahoma. It's not necessary for us to have a branch in those other states, but here's the trick. You have to be familiar with the laws of each of the states because they all vary. And so if we decide to open up our program and bank the state of Colorado or the state of California, we have to have specific guidelines for those particular states. And that's where a partner like RiskScout comes in, because Kristen is an expert on the regulations. She's able to go in and take a look at those laws from state to state and advise us on what we need to be gathering, what we need to be monitoring, and what we need to be doing overall in order to effectively and compliantly bank a client in California or Colorado. So no, I don't believe it's necessary to have a branch there, but it's necessary to understand the regulations of the state in which they operate, as well as having a way to get that cash to the Federal Reserve.
Nice.
Definitely. Okay. And then kind of going off of that, another question regarding RiskScout and software is, have you ever tried any other software?
Yes, I have. Yes, we did. Let me just preface this by saying there are three main areas where you need to really concentrate on your software, and you need to make sure that you have a very user-friendly online application so that the onboarding process is easy for the customer. And when I say easy, keep in mind that you're going to ask them for probably 20 different pieces of documentation. You're going to need all of their entity documents and beneficial ownership that you would have if you were opening any type of business account. But then in addition to that, the laws of that state are going to say, okay, you have to have a nursery license if you're selling clones or if you're selling seeds. You know, there's just a lot of different areas where you need licensing. So in the state of Oklahoma, the governing body is the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority. And they spell it out real clearly, all of the licenses that are required. And then you have municipalities who have their own rules as well. And so understanding what everybody needs is very important there. So you've got the onboarding piece, you have the ongoing compliance piece, and that is where you go back and check to make sure John Smith, who opened the dispensary down the street, you got to go back and make sure that he remains compliant. Just because he was compliant when he onboarded, it doesn't mean that he has renewed his license and that type of thing. So the second part of that is the ongoing compliance and the checkpoints to make sure that they remain compliant. And then lastly is the transaction monitoring. And that is the piece that you're going to have to do. And many, I know that many banks are doing this manually. They're all looking for a good solution for this, but you've got to go through those transactions. You have to monitor those transactions and make sure that you have everything together to complete your SAR. And SARs are a nightmare, as Kristen alluded to earlier. So back to the original question, have I tried any other software? Yes, I have. And I really feel like the software that we started out with just was not ready to handle the volume of cannabis clients that we saw. And so somewhere in this first 12 months of operation, somebody introduces me to RiskScout. And as I sat down and took a look at the software that RiskScout provided, their onboarding was so much easier, and it's so easy for them to customize it to your institution, to your program, to your bank's policy, and also to the laws of that state. And so, long story short, I have tried other software, but they just didn't really understand the scope of the work that RiskScout did.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that so clearly. And kind of going off of that, someone is wondering, How many marijuana accounts do you have, and how many full-time compliance employees do you have?
We currently have about 350 accounts. We currently have 3 full-time compliance people dedicated only to cannabis, and I need at least 1 more. I really need about 1.5 more.
Yeah.
One and a half.
And Mel, I got a question though. How did you figure out that's how many people you needed?
Well, we figured that out because we had someone do a time management study, and that someone was your very own Kristen Parker that we're talking to right here. and she sat down with our staff and asked them to make a list of everything they do on a daily basis and on a weekly basis and that kind of thing. And she really guided my team through this exercise and took into account how many clients they're handling, how many accounts that we're monitoring, and she was able to determine during that exercise that we just simply do not have enough people to run this program. As you guys all know, we can put software in place, and RiskScout has been such a wonderful resource for us. Software in place that will provide some automation, that will provide documentation and history of the checkpoints with these customers and the monitoring and the reviews and that kind of stuff. But we all know that FinCEN really wants someone to look at these SARs. They don't really want that to be an automated push the button, nobody ever looks at that report. So the SAR piece of that is a pretty time-consuming piece of the puzzle. And so Kristen was able to look at our program, look at our policy, look at the number of accounts that we're servicing, as well as the staff that we had on hand, and determine that we need a little bit more help.
Yeah, I think a good way to look at it too is that, there's automation and what we provide at RiskScout of automatic check-ins with clients and collection of information, and really, taking the guesswork out of, or taking the spreadsheets away and the calendar reminders away, and really automating that heavy lifting of that piece of it without automating the pieces that regulators and FinCEN don't feel comfortable with. Again,
Right.
SAR filing, SAR narrative writing for you, or completing your review for you. There's still gonna need some eyeballs on that stuff, but where we really shine is taking about 80% of your overhead of that, just manual pieces, that tracking and filling out this spreadsheet and getting calendar ticklers and all this stuff, where really stuff can just fall through the cracks. It really serves as picking up those pieces and helping your staffing focus on exactly where the regulators would prefer you focus, is detecting and monitoring for suspicious activity. Yeah.
Right. And as you guys all know, and I am more of a salesperson than a compliance person, and so I always give my compliance team a hard time because they like to pull things out of the database and stick them in a spreadsheet, an extra spreadsheet. And it just cracks me up because that really must be a little time consuming, but that's just their comfort level. And so RiskScout does a really good job of working through this and taking the spreadsheets out and taking the calendar reminders out, because it's all built into that system. The reporting is built into that system. The checkpoints and the reminders and the tasks and the to-dos. And so it really, if it's used properly, if it's set up properly, it lets your compliance people be compliance people and work on the things that FinCEN really wants you to have a little bit of human touch involved in. And so it's a very nice system, because those people who need to be preparing those SARs are putting their time and effort and their manpower to the SARs and the monitoring of the transactions, rather than creating a new spreadsheet.
Definitely. Someone is wondering, does RiskScout have a solution for site visits?
I can answer that one, Mel.
Yes.
So yes, certainly we do. We actually, there's a couple of different options. In our actual platform itself, you have the ability to create a site visit form to your institution's liking, whatever you guys are looking for, and document that whole site visit through our platform. It's easily done either on your mobile phone or through a tablet or a computer, the whole 9 yards. The other option is we have partnered with another party and trained them on how to conduct site visits, what they should be looking for, give them a standard form, and along with guidance for taking pictures and all of that. And we have them trained specifically through myself and another subject matter expert, and they know exactly what to be looking for. And they have the ability to go out and do that site visit for you for a fee involved with that.
Awesome. And then another question is, do you use a separate AI system for cannabis client alerts versus all other clients?
So are you trying to compare the overall high-risk customer base with cannabis base alone? Is that what we think the question is referring to?
I think it is.
Okay. So we're a Jack Henry bank, and we use Yellowhammer as our enterprise BSA tool. Yellowhammer can be configured for specific lines of high risk business. And I am not a Yellowhammer expert, but so that is one option, and that is a pretty good option, really. But you really have to dig down deep and work with those vendors to have specific parameters and specific triggers for whatever line of high risk business you're looking at. So while you can probably use the same piece of software that you're using enterprise-wide, you're really going to want to beef it up and make sure that the parameters are adequate specifically for cannabis.
Got it.
Very cool. And we have another question. Do your customers upload their information, such as COVA, to RiskScout, or does RiskScout pull that information?
At Oklahoma State Bank, most of the information that we request on our applications, the customer is going to upload those documents. And Kristen, I certainly won't touch on what piece of that you guys do on the onboarding process. I would let you speak to that, but the majority of what we're getting is provided by our customer.
Yeah. So when for Oklahoma's state ongoing monitoring efforts, so a lot of what goes on is comparing their seed to sale reports or the OMMA reports to their transaction history of what's happening at the institution. So in order to get that information, we automate the collection of that information by sending an automated, what we call a checkpoint to that customer. They're able to receive a link, and then they just attach a PDF to that link, and move on with their lives. That link is that information they put in there then is automatically loaded up to their profile within our platform and is available for that review for the institution at that time. We see a lot of great success in the way that we've set it up so that it's mobile friendly, tablet friendly, whatever. We have about a almost 100% success rate in getting those customers to upload that because of how easy the link is for them to get in there and do it. So it takes a lot of that noise out of the customer. It's and it helps really the institution not have to have that burden of following up over email to the customers, or remember to ask them for it, right? It just automatically happens every month.
Definitely. And they also want to know, do you collect monthly information or quarterly? What does that all look like for the different things that need to happen periodically?
Well, in the state of Oklahoma, all license holders are required to submit their sales reports to the OMMA monthly. And so we require the exact same format, the same report, so it does not create any more work for that business owner, but they can just send us a copy of what they sent to the state of Oklahoma. And then we are working with RiskScout to build out what our other checkpoints need to look at. And so Kristen is able to take your program and look at your policy and say, I think it would be best if you collected this quarterly, or if you collected this semi-annually. And one thing I would like to really say to these bankers out there who are thinking about a program like this is the resources you get with RiskScout are tremendous. It's like having your own consultant at your fingertips. And so Kristen, again, has taken our program, looked at our program, reviewed our policy, and told us the things that she would like us to consider to look at twice a year, and what we need to look at every 90 days, and what we need to look at monthly. And so there are different things that we require at those different intervals.
Definitely. And we have another question. What is your periodic reporting to the board of directors like? What's included in that scope?
Okay. We send them a lot of metrics, really. I mean, I send them metrics on our sales effort through our CRM. I let them understand how many we have in the pipeline and how many accounts we opened per month, and other metrics like average collected balances. I also report to them how many SARs we file each month. I report how many CTRs we file each month. And so, there's kind of a financial report as well as just some of the metrics, some of the logistics metrics. And then in addition to that, we have every other month, we have an outside firm that is doing an MRB audit for us. And I don't imagine that we will continue doing this from now on every other month, but we felt like as we kick this program off that we would like an outside firm to say, I think you really should concentrate on this because the regulators want a little bit more of this. They want more documentation here. And that has really helped us after we launched our program and after having been through one exam to use this firm that helps us kind of pick apart all of the compliance pieces and make sure that we're not spinning our wheels doing things that they do not think are necessary, and that we are also spending enough time on the things where they think the regulators and examiners will really focus.
That definitely makes sense. And another question, does RiskScout work well with states that do not have a metric system in place?
I'll take that one. Indeed, we do actually, because the links that we are sending out, the automated links that we're sending out for those reports, work for the customer to upload any seed to sale system report into there. So it does work with any of those because they have the ability to upload whichever system that they are using.
Gotcha. And then another one is, how would someone go about marketing their THC program?
I would love to talk about that.
Yeah.
So in the state of Oklahoma, there are 5 to 7 banks that I have identified who are cannabis friendly. In the state of Oklahoma, there is one bank who openly markets that they bank cannabis, and that would be Oklahoma State Bank. So it's very interesting to me that any bank would go to the great lengths and spend the time, the resources, the money to get a program like this in place and then pretend like you don't do this. In fact, I have spoken with bankers from the largest bank in Oklahoma that banks this, and they have all but denied that they bank it. So everybody's approach to this is a little bit different. Of course, I am in charge of marketing at Oklahoma State Bank, so marketing is kind of in my in my blood, but I'm flabbergasted that these other banks not only don't market it, some of them say, oh, we don't do that. So our marketing efforts consist of digital marketing. We have a cannabis Facebook page. We have information on this on our website. We use a CRM, we use HubSpot. And so when someone comes to our website, puts in their contact information, that kind of puts them on that conveyor belt, and it starts triggering automatic emails to these customers. So all of our marketing primarily is just digital marketing. We have access to the entire licensee base from the Oklahoma Medical Marijuana Authority, and so we use that, and we send out emails and different marketing pieces that sometimes these emails will include our partners, like our cash courier, things like that. But most of it is done through digital marketing channels. When we first started, we were doing some print ads and some local publications, but by and large, word of mouth has been our biggest seller. This is seriously, guys, a situation, if you build it, they will come. So don't really have to put a lot of marketing dollars out there, but you do, because of the enormity and and the sheer number of license holders in the state of Oklahoma, which by the way exceeds 10,000 licenses, there is a lot of business. There's plenty to go around, and we have not had to spend a lot of marketing dollars because word of mouth has been the best solution for that. But I would encourage you, if you are going to put the money and the effort and the resources into a program like this, I would encourage you, for the perception of your customers, that you embrace the cannabis market.
Mel, would you say it's important though, with that being that many people licensed and all of that, that you have some way to kind of, I don't mean any pun here either by saying weeding them out, but weed out the customers that don't kind of fit your risk appetite? How, what was that like with your previous software experience compared to what it is with us at RiskScout?
Well, one thing that I would say about this, and again, it varies widely from state to state. Some states have 15 licenses, and then we have over 10,000. So when you look at a state that has 10,000 plus licenses, and anybody for the sum of I think it's $2,500 in the state of Oklahoma, you can get a dispensary license. So as you can imagine, what that does to the market is we've got a lot of mom and pops. I mean, we have a dispensary on every corner. Sometimes we have one on each corner of the intersection. And so at first, being a community bank in Oklahoma, we decided, okay, we want to be able to help all these guys. We know that they're struggling. We know that they have cash. We know that it is a security risk. We know they don't have access to the banking system and electronic payments and all that stuff. And so we're here to help all these guys. Well, what you'll soon learn in a state with unlimited licenses is there's a lot of these guys that you really don't want to help. And there are a lot of these guys who have been probably growing and selling cannabis most of their adult life. It's just only now become legal. And so you can really target the customers you're looking for by your application. And I think where Kristen is going with this is RiskScout will work with you to really kind of help you determine what your appetite for risk is, and maybe which sector that you want to concentrate on. I know there are banks who don't really like to bank the dispensaries, but that's where most of the money is changing hands. And in the dispensary, they've got a lot of challenges because every single transaction that comes through there is a cash transaction. And I know that there are banks that say, no, I'm not going to do dispensaries. I really feel like that is something that you can do really well if you want to do dispensaries, because these folks need help. But through RiskScout, once you determine what verticals you want to approach, and once you determine what the scope of your program really looks like, then they will help with the application and really tailor that application directly to your bank's program.
Yeah, and then one thing to point out too is that's really through a pre-qualification, and so kind of helping you determine who fits your risk appetite to begin with and who doesn't, so that your compliance team isn't wasting time going through applications that wouldn't fit in your risk appetite too. The other thing too is once they've made it through their application phase, full application, they're able to then, when they've submitted all of their licensing and all of the information about their beneficial owners, the whole 9 yards. At RiskScout, we do something called First Pass, where we're going to take all of that information in that application and we're going to review it against our sources of truth to ensure that that license truly is, active, that, that the beneficial owners, don't have any adverse media. We're going to review websites. We're going to going to review social media to look for certain red flags within there, a whole bunch of stuff that really helps in that due diligence that typically takes quite a bit of time for compliance teams.
Yes, that is correct. That first pass is a huge step that takes, and then hours and hours of work off of your compliance staff. So that is a tremendous service. And I haven't seen that offered in other softwares, by the way, Kristen.
Good. One thing that I think everybody should know here that's on this call too is a lot of times when you're in the cannabis space too, you're also banking, maybe other higher risk businesses. So perhaps you're banking ATMs, perhaps you're banking check cashers, money service businesses, and that. And one thing that's important to note about RiskScout is that our system is so dynamic that you can bank any of your high risk industries within our software. So you can manage, your money service business relationships, applications to ongoing monitoring. You can do anything under the sun that you can think of high risk business wise or not. That relationship and that compliance efforts can all be managed within our system, which makes it really easy during audit and exam time because all of your exam and audit prep is housed with, for that particular customer is housed within our system, and you're not having to go all over Timbuktu, old cold storage, in drives and all that to collect the information. Everything you've managed with that customer lives in our platform, which really helps with that audit and exam prep as well.
Yeah, that's correct.
Mel, is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up? Looks like we've got 2 more minutes.
I can't think of anything in particular other than if I would like to say if there are bankers out there who are looking to compare softwares and look at the different features and that kind of thing. I found RiskScout to be very open and very willing to have conversations about what they can do to really customize the programs for the banks that enter into this relationship, as opposed to here is one solution that should be adequate for all banks. I hope you enjoy it. We won't make any changes.
We certainly like to solution with banks, and we'll be the first to tell anybody if we don't feel like we're the right solution, but we definitely like to get in there with our institutions and see where we best make their lives easier long term.
Yeah. So it's not like you're looking for a new core system and you look at these 3 different products and they tell you what they can do and what they can't do, and you decide if you can live with what they can't do. That's really refreshing to work with a software company like RiskScout that sits down and decides exactly what they are able to do to fit your program, to fit your needs.
Well, thank you, Mel, for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to visiting with everyone soon.
Sounds good. And for the rest of you guys out there, just some kind of final thoughts here and calls to action. We stay pretty active on LinkedIn, so if you're there, follow us. There's always good tips, tricks, thoughts in there, good best practices, the whole 9 yards, kind of get the scoop on what we've been up to lately. We'd love for you to join our higher risk banking group on LinkedIn, which is just a group of like-minded folks in there that really, again, share best practices with each other's, pick each other's brains. Sometimes there's some funny memes in there, you know, gotta have a little humor in this land sometime. And then, you know, if you're really interested in what we're doing or you want to ask us some more questions, you can always contact me or anybody at our team. I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with all of you guys. So if you want to look at our product, get a demo, or just get a time to pick my brain a minute, more than happy to talk through that. So I want to be respectful of your time. It's 4 o'clock, but thank you guys again. And please let us know if you have any questions. Thanks again for everything.
Thank you, everyone.